Why would someone fill their car up at a petrol station and then just drive off without paying? You can probably guess the answer, but what isn't talked about enough is the implications, the social implications of the fact that people are doing this so often now. I'm Dr. Chris, and in this video, we're going to talk about the psychology of fuel theft. BBC News recently reported a big increase in the number of people filling up at a petrol station and then making off without paying, putting the figure at 62% year-on-year increase. That means the average petrol forecourt is now seeing 3.4 thefts per week compared to 2.1 a year ago. This is a really significant increase. Now, what this tells us is that crime is socially created. So this isn't to do with whether people are good or bad, because we're all a mixture of both. What it does tell us, and what research consistently tells us, is that people's behaviour depends on context rather than kind of innate goodness or badness. And we know this because the thing that's changed over the last year isn't that everyone's suddenly become morally corrupt. It's that petrol prices have gone through the roof and the cost of living crisis continues to bite. So right now, people are often stuck between, do I put fuel in my car or do I pay for food and for heating for my family? And given those choices, it becomes a pretty easy decision. You just drive off from the petrol station and hope you don't get caught. You can't not have the fuel because people need to get to work, and so that would be economically catastrophic for people's families as well. So the only option they're left with is stealing the fuel. Now, there's a couple of ways that we could solve this, right? Because what this shows is that crime is a social problem, and so we need a social solution. We need to work out as a society what we're going to do about this. Now, one thing is we could just punish people really harshly, but historically this has worked really poorly. So if we look at here in the UK, we used to hang people and we used to have transportation. That's where you'd get sent to Australia to be an indentured servant. None of these things really put people off. People still stole, they still committed crimes, because when people are desperate, there isn't really anything that you can scare them with to stop them doing something. They will just take the risk because they don't feel like they have any other option. The other solution is we could put more security and more policing in place, but these are bad options for all of us as well. So if we look at putting extra security in place, that slows things down at petrol stations, requires additional investment from the fuel companies, and they will pass that on to us, the consumers, in the form of price increases. So if we think that prices are high now, they're going to keep going up while petrol companies either invest in more security or price the new level of theft into the price of petrol. Then we could also add more policing, but again, this costs a lot of money, and the government will pass this along to you and me in the form of higher taxes. So one way or another, we're going to end up paying for this. But there is a much better solution, a solution that is proven time and time again to reduce crime, and that's paying a living wage. That's tackling economic inequality. When people can afford to put fuel in their car so they can get to work, and they can afford to put food on the table to heat their houses for their families, people don't do as much crime. Some people will still do crime, but there is a huge dose-response relationship between poverty and criminality. When people feel they have a place in society, when people feel that having a legitimate job can pay its way, people would rather do that. They'd rather be part of society than commit crime. But when they feel there's no option, when we feel that we can't pay our bills, then we get desperate, and that's when acts like stealing fuel massively increase. And that's what we've seen over the past year, is this fuel price increase has really driven crime. So what that tells us there is this idea of the dose-response relationship. We know the bigger the dose of economic inequality, the bigger the dose of fuel price increases, the more crime there is. And that suggests that it doesn't just correlate, but it's causative. And it is. We know this from a whole range of different social factors that we've looked at as laid out. And if you want to look at the inner level, that's a great book that explains all of this, is that the more that we have poverty, the more that we have crime. And if we want to reduce the crime, we need to tackle the poverty. So what do you think we should do about this? Let me know in the comments.